Welcome, dear listener, to another gentle journey through history with the Sleep Library. Tonight, we descend into the quiet depths of the earth, where ancient civilizations carved entire cities from living rock. Let your breathing slow as we explore these hushed underground worlds, where footsteps echoed softly through stone corridors and communities thrived in peaceful darkness. Close your eyes and imagine stepping down worn stone steps, each one carved by patient hands centuries ago. The temperature drops gradually as we move away from the sun's warmth, entering a realm where time moves differently, where the urgent rush of the surface world fades into gentle stillness. Our journey begins in the heart of ancient Anatolia, in what we now call Cappadocia, Turkey. Here, beneath rolling hills dotted with fairy chimneys and withered volcanic rock, lies one of humanity's most remarkable achievements. Derinkuyu, an underground city that once housed 20,000 souls in its stone embrace. The entrance is modest, a simple doorway cut into the hillside, barely noticeable to the casual observer. But as we step across this threshold, we enter a world that stretches 18 levels deep into the earth, a labyrinth of chambers, corridors, and communal spaces carved with infinite patience from the soft volcanic tuff. The air here carries a different quality than the wind above. It moves slowly through carefully engineered ventilation shafts, carrying whispers from chamber to chamber. Each breath feels heavier, more deliberate, as if the very act of breathing becomes a meditation in these depths. The temperature remains constant, neither warm nor cold, eternal spring that knows no seasons. Let us pause for a moment on the first level, allowing our eyes to adjust to the gentle dimness. Oil lamps would have flickered along the walls when this place was alive with inhabitants, casting dancing shadows that transformed the carved stone into something almost alive. The flames would have been carefully tended, never allowed to burn too brightly, for light was precious here, rationed and cherished like water in a desert. The walls themselves tell stories in their smooth curves and careful angles. Every surface bears the marks of the tools that shaped them, patient chiseling that removed the stone grain by grain, creating these spaces where families would gather, where children would learn their lessons, where elders would share wisdom in voices that never rose above a whisper. As we move deeper, following corridors that wind and branch like the roots of some vast underground tree, we begin to understand the rhythm of life in these depths. This was not a place of hurried footsteps or raised voices. Movement here was deliberate, purposeful. The narrow passages naturally encouraged single-file walking, creating a natural flow that prevented crowds and chaos. The second level opens before us, revealing the first of the residential areas. Here, families carved their private spaces from the stone, creating homes that were both intimate and connected to the greater community. Each dwelling is modest, perhaps 2 or 3 small chambers connected by low doorways that required inhabitants to bow slightly as they passed from room to room. This gentle bowing, repeated countless times each day, created a natural posture of humility and reflection. In these family quarters, we can still see the small niches carved into the walls where precious items were stored, perhaps a clay oil lamp, a wooden comb, a small mirror of polished bronze. These personal touches remind us that despite the stark stone surroundings, these were homes filled with the quiet warmth of human affection. The sleeping chambers were carved just large enough for a family to rest together, with small raised platforms where woven mats and woolen blankets would have provided comfort. Children would have fallen asleep to the gentle murmur of their parents' voices, discussing the quiet events of their underground days, planning for tomorrow's tasks, sharing stories that had been passed down through generations of cave dwellers. Between the family quarters, common areas provided space for the community to gather. Here, the ceilings rise slightly higher, allowing for the kind of social interaction that keeps any community healthy. But even in these gathering spaces, the architecture encourages quiet conversation. The acoustics of the carved chambers naturally soften voices, making it difficult to speak loudly or harshly. Every word seems to be absorbed by the stone, creating an environment where communication becomes more thoughtful, more intentional. As we continue our descent, moving through the third and fourth levels, we encounter the workshops where the daily business of life continued even in this buried world. Here, craftsmen worked by the light of oil lamps, their hands shaping clay, weaving cloth, working leather, and creating the thousand small necessities that make civilization possible. The rhythm of work in these underground workshops would have been unlike anything we know today. Without the pressure of changing weather or the urgency of daylight hours, craftsmen could work at their own pace, allowing their hands to follow the natural rhythm of their craft. A potter might spend hours shaping a single vessel, feeling the clay respond to gentle pressure, coaxing it into perfect form without haste or frustration. The sound of work here would have been muffled and gentle, the soft scraping of a leather worker's tool, the whispered brush of a weaver's shuttle, the quiet tap-tap-tap of a stoneworker shaping a tool. These sounds would blend together into a kind of underground symphony, a gentle percussion that marked the passage of time in a world without sun or moon. Food preparation areas occupy strategic locations throughout the city, carefully positioned to serve multiple levels while managing the challenges of cooking in an enclosed environment. The kitchens were marvels of engineering, with sophisticated ventilation systems that carried smoke up through the levels and out to the surface through hidden vents. Cooking fires were kept small and carefully tended, their flames providing not just heat for food preparation, but also a gathering point where families and neighbors could share the day's quiet events. Imagine the gentle ritual of meal preparation in these underground kitchens. Grain would be ground by hand between stone querns, the circular motion creating a meditative rhythm that could continue for hours. The sound of grinding grain would echo softly through the corridors, a signal to the community that another meal was being prepared, another day was flowing forward in its ancient pattern. Water was perhaps the most precious resource in these underground cities, and its management reveals the sophisticated understanding these ancient engineers had of their environment. Wells were dug to reach underground streams and springs, and the water was distributed throughout the city through a network of channels carved directly into the stone floors. The sound of water moving through these channels would have provided a constant, gentle background music, a soft trickling that reminded inhabitants of the life-giving resource that made their underground existence possible. The water distribution system created natural gathering points where people would come to fill their clay vessels. These moments of daily necessity became opportunities for quiet social interaction, neighbors sharing news, children learning from their elders, young people meeting and forming the bonds that would last a lifetime. But even these social moments maintained a hushed quality that characterized all life in the depths. Voices were kept low, conversations intimate, creating a sense of community that was based on closeness rather than volume. As we reach the end of our first chapter, pausing at the threshold between the fourth and fifth levels, we can begin to appreciate the profound wisdom embedded in these underground cities. Here, ancient peoples created not just shelter from external dangers, but an entire way of life that valued quiet contemplation, community cooperation, and the gentle rhythm of days unmarked by sunrise or sunset. The stone walls around us hold the memory of countless quiet conversations, gentle laughter, whispered lullabies, and the soft shuffle of feet on carved stone floors. This was a world where haste was unknown, where every action was deliberate, where the simple act of moving from one chamber to another became a form of walking meditation. Take a moment now to feel the weight of stone above us, the solid security of these carved chambers, the peaceful darkness that wraps around us like a warm blanket. In our next chapter, we will descend deeper, exploring the spiritual heart of these underground cities, where faith and community intertwined in the soft light of oil lamps and the gentle echo of whispered prayers. As we continue our gentle descent into the depths of Derinkuyu, the quality of silence around us deepens and transforms. Here, On the 5th and 6th levels, we encounter the sacred heart of this underground city, the chapels and places of worship carved with infinite care from the living rock. The transition from residential areas to sacred space is marked by a subtle change in the architecture itself. The corridors widen slightly, the ceilings rise, and the rough-hewn walls give way to surfaces that have been polished smooth by centuries of gentle touch. Every curve has been considered, every angle deliberately chosen to create an environment that naturally draws the mind toward contemplation and prayer. The first chapel we encounter is small and intimate, carved for a congregation that would never number more than 30 or 40 souls. The altar area is raised slightly above the main floor, not to create hierarchy, but to better project the soft voices of those leading worship into the carved acoustic chamber that surrounds us. The stone here has been worked until it gleams with a subtle luster, polished by the oil from countless hands that have touched these surfaces in reverence and wonder. Above our heads, the ceiling curves in a gentle arch that seems to embrace the space below. Small niches have been carved at regular intervals along the walls, each one designed to hold a single oil lamp. When these lamps were lit, they would have created a soft, warm glow that transformed the grey stone into something golden and alive. The light would have danced across the carved surfaces, creating shadows that seemed to breathe with the rhythm of prayer and meditation. In the center of this chapel floor, we can still see the smooth depression worn by generations of worshippers who knelt here in contemplation. The stone has been polished to a gentle smoothness by the pressure of knees and hands, creating a surface that speaks of countless hours of quiet devotion. Imagine the prayers whispered here, rising like invisible incense to be absorbed by the stone overhead. The acoustics of these sacred spaces reveal another layer of ancient wisdom. Every sound a whispered prayer, a softly hummed hymn. The gentle rustle of robes is amplified just enough to be heard throughout the chamber, but never so much as to create harsh echoes. The stone seems to embrace each sound, hold it for a moment, then release it gently into the surrounding silence. Moving deeper into the religious complex, we discover that the spiritual heart of Derinkuyu was not a single large cathedral, but rather a network of interconnected sacred spaces, each serving a different aspect of community spiritual life. Here is a smaller chamber designed for individual meditation, its walls carved with simple geometric patterns that invite contemplation without distraction. There, a slightly larger space where religious instruction would have taken place, the teacher's voice carrying clearly to students seated cross-legged on woven mats spread across the stone floor. One of the most remarkable features of these underground chapels is their complete disconnection from the cycles of day and night that govern surface worship. Here, in eternal darkness broken only by the warm glow of oil lamps, time moved according to its own rhythm. Prayers were offered not at sunrise or sunset, but according to the internal clock of the community, creating a spiritual practice that was freed from the constraints of solar time. The preparation for worship in these underground chapels would have been a ritual in itself. Oil for the lamps had to be carefully measured and distributed. Wicks needed to be trimmed to ensure clean, steady flames. The stone floors were swept with wand brooms made from bundled twigs, and the surfaces were wiped clean with cloths dampened in precious water. These preparatory tasks were not mere housekeeping, they were acts of devotion that prepared both the space and the hearts of the worshippers for the sacred time ahead. When the community gathered for worship, they would arrive in small groups, their soft footsteps echoing gently through the corridors. Conversations would fade to whispers and then to silence as they entered the sacred space. The very architecture encouraged reverence, the low doorways that required each person to bow as they entered, the intimate scale that made every gathering feel like a family coming together, the soft lighting that drew attention inward rather than outward. The religious practices that took place in these chapels were necessarily quiet and contemplative. Without musical instruments beyond perhaps a simple wooden flute or a small hand drum, worship relied on the human voice, soft chanting, whispered prayers, gentle humming that seemed to merge with the stone itself. The community would join their voices in harmonies that had been refined over generations, creating music that was designed not to soar and triumph, but to settle and comfort. Children learn their first prayers in these stone chambers, their small voices joining the chorus of their elders. The acoustics that made these spaces perfect for quiet worship also made them ideal for religious instruction. A teacher could speak in barely more than a whisper and still be heard clearly throughout the chamber. Students learn not just the words of prayers and hymns, but the proper way to move in sacred space slowly, deliberately, with respect for the centuries of worship that had preceded them. The oil lamps that provided light for these sacred gatherings were themselves objects of reverence. Each lamp was carefully crafted from clay, its design simple but elegant. The oil, usually olive oil when it could be obtained, or oil pressed from seeds grown in the community's underground gardens, was considered too precious to waste. Wicks were made from twisted flax or cotton, materials that had to be imported from the surface world at considerable effort and expense. Lighting these lamps was a ritual that marked the beginning of sacred time. The flame would be passed from lamp to lamp, each one adding its gentle glow to the gathering light until the entire chapel glowed with warmth. The process was slow and meditative, giving the community time to settle into the proper frame of mind for worship. As each lamp was lit, it seemed to bring the stone walls to life, revealing textures and carvings that remained hidden in darkness. The carved decorations in these chapels are remarkably restrained, simple geometric patterns, occasional floral motifs, stylized representations of doves or fish that speak of peace and abundance. These decorations were not created to impress or overwhelm, but to provide focal points for meditation and prayer. A worshipper could spend an entire service contemplating a single carved motif, finding in its simple lines a doorway to deeper spiritual understanding. Between the larger chapels, smaller spaces served as private retreats for individual prayer and meditation. These tiny chambers, barely large enough for a single person to sit comfortably, were carved with extraordinary care. Every surface is smooth, every corner rounded, creating a womb-like environment that naturally encouraged introspection and spiritual communion. Here, members of the community could come for private prayer, personal reflection, or simply to sit in silence and listen to the gentle sounds of the underground city flowing around them. The spiritual life of these underground communities extended beyond formal worship services. The very act of living in these carved chambers, of moving through corridors where generations had walked before, of sharing meals prepared in kitchens blessed by countless prayers, created an environment where the sacred and mundane intertwined seamlessly. Every aspect of daily life was touched by spirituality, not in a burdensome way, but as naturally as breathing. The cycle of seasons, so important to surface dwellers, was marked differently in these underground cities. Without access to the changing patterns of sun and weather, the community created its own rhythm of celebration and observance. Feast days were marked by the lighting of additional lamps, by the preparation of special foods, by gatherings that brought the entire community together in shared joy and reverence. Even death, when it came to members of the community, was handled with the same quiet reverence that characterized all aspects of underground life. The deceased were prepared for burial with gentle care, their bodies wrapped in simple cloth and carried through the corridors in processions that moved at walking pace, allowing the community to show proper respect and to begin the process of communal grieving. The burial chambers, carved into the deepest levels of the city, were designed as places of peace and remembrance. Here, the departed were laid to rest in niches carved specifically for them, surrounded by small personal items and offerings that spoke of lives lived in service to the community. The walls of these chambers were often decorated with simple carving stars, flowers, or religious symbols that reminded visitors of the hope and continuity that sustained the community even in the face of loss. As we prepare to leave these sacred spaces, and continue our journey deeper into the underground city, take a moment to appreciate the profound wisdom embedded in their design. These ancient architects understood that true sacred space is not created by grandeur or ornamentation, but by the quality of attention and care that goes into every detail. They created environments that naturally encouraged contemplation, community, and the kind of deep spiritual connection that emerges when external distractions are stripped away. The gentle glow of imagined oil lamps guides us as we prepare to descend further, carrying with us the peace and reverence that these sacred spaces were designed to inspire. In our next chapter, we will explore the ingenious systems that made life possible in these depths, the ventilation shafts that carried fresh air to every level, the water management systems that sustained thousands of inhabitants, and the storage facilities that ensured the community's survival through whatever dangers might threaten the world above. Deep beneath the earth, where the sun's warmth never penetrates and the wind never stirs, the ancient engineers of Derinkuyu faced a challenge that would test their ingenuity and understanding of natural forces. How do you create breathable air for 20,000 people living in chambers carved from solid rock? The answer lies in one of humanity's most remarkable achievements in underground engineering, a ventilation system so sophisticated that it continued to function perfectly for over a millennium. As we move through the 7th level of the city, our path takes us past the openings of vertical shafts that disappear both upward and downward into darkness. These are not mere holes in the rock, but carefully engineered airways that form the lungs of this underground world. Each shaft has been carved with mathematical precision, its diameter calculated to provide optimal airflow, its interior walls polished smooth to reduce friction and turbulence. Place your hand near one of these openings, and you can feel it a gentle movement of air, so subtle that it might be mistaken for imagination, yet constant and reliable. This is the breath of the underground city, drawn down from the surface through ingenious systems that transform the natural pressure differences between surface and depth into life-sustaining circulation. The main ventilation shaft of Derinkuyu descends an astounding 55 meters through the heart of the city, connecting all 18 levels in a single, continuous column of moving air. Standing at its opening on any level, we can hear the faint whisper of air movement, not the rush of wind, but something far more subtle, like the breathing of some vast, sleeping giant. The engineering principles behind this system reveal a sophisticated understanding of fluid dynamics that would not be formally documented by science for many centuries. The ancient builders understood that warm air rises and cool air descends, and they used this knowledge to create a circulation system that required no mechanical power, no moving parts, and no maintenance beyond the occasional clearing of debris. At the surface, the main shaft opens through what appears to be an ordinary wellhead. But this is no simple water well, it is the breathing hole of an entire civilization. The opening is cleverly disguised and protected, ensuring that the vital airflow could not be easily blocked by enemies or accidentally obstructed by surface activities. Around this primary opening, dozens of smaller shafts create a network of air circulation that reaches every corner of the underground complex. The secondary ventilation shafts are marvels of engineering precision. Each one follows a carefully calculated path through the rock, branching and rejoining in patterns that ensure no chamber is left without fresh air. Some shafts run straight down through multiple levels, while others curve and twist, following the natural grain of the rock while maintaining the proper angles needed for optimal airflow. Walking through the corridors, we can observe the subtle signs of this ancient climate control system. Small openings in walls and ceilings mark the endpoints of ventilation ducts. These openings are sized and positioned with extraordinary care, large enough to provide adequate air circulation, but small enough to prevent the loss of precious heat from oil lamps and cooking fires. The temperature regulation achieved by this system is remarkable. Throughout the year, Whether the surface world experiences the heat of summer or the cold of winter, the temperature in the underground city remains constant. This stability was achieved not through heating or cooling systems, but through the thermal mass of the surrounding rock and the continuous, gentle circulation of air that prevented stagnation without creating uncomfortable drafts. In the workshop areas, additional ventilation considerations had to be addressed. Metalworking, pottery firing, and cooking all produced smoke and fumes that could quickly become dangerous in an enclosed environment. The ancient engineers solved this problem by creating specialized exhaust systems, narrow shafts that carried contaminated air directly to the surface while preventing the loss of general circulation. The pottery workshops demonstrate this specialized ventilation most clearly. Here, kilns were carved directly into the rock, their firing chambers connected to dedicated exhaust shafts that drew smoke and heat upward with remarkable efficiency. The kilns could operate at high temperatures without filling the surrounding chambers with smoke, allowing craftsmen to continue their work in comfort while pottery was being fired nearby. The leather working areas required different ventilation considerations. The processes of tanning and treating hides produced odors that, while not dangerous, could make life unpleasant in the confined underground spaces. Separate air circulation systems carried these odors away while maintaining the fresh air supply needed for the workers to breathe comfortably during their long hours of detailed handwork. Food storage areas presented their own unique challenges. Grain, preserved meats, and other foodstuffs needed protection from moisture and pests while requiring enough air circulation to prevent spoilage. The ventilation systems serving the storage chambers were designed with remarkable sophistication, providing just enough air movement to prevent stagnation while maintaining the cool, dry conditions that kept food fresh for extended periods. The distribution of fresh air throughout the residential areas required perhaps the greatest engineering skill. Every family dwelling, no matter how small or how deep in the city, needed access to breathable air. The solution involved networks of small ducts that branched from the main ventilation shafts like blood vessels from arteries, carrying fresh air to every sleeping chamber, every family gathering area, every private space where people lived their daily lives. These residential air ducts were often incorporated into the architectural design in ways that made them nearly invisible. A slightly raised ceiling might conceal an air channel. A decorative carved border around a doorway might hide a ventilation opening. The engineers understood that effective air circulation should be felt rather than seen, providing comfort without calling attention to the mechanical systems that made underground life possible. The acoustic properties of the ventilation system added another dimension to underground life. Air moving through stone channels creates its own subtle symphony, gentle whispers and sighs that provided a constant, barely audible background to daily activities. This natural sound masking helped maintain privacy in the close quarters of underground living, allowing families to conduct their private conversations without being overheard by neighbors in adjacent chambers. Maintenance of the ventilation system was a community responsibility that required constant attention and specialized knowledge. Certain members of the community were trained in the art of reading air currents, of detecting blockages or problems before they became dangerous. These air keepers, as they might have been called, would regularly inspect the accessible portions of the ventilation network, clearing away any debris and ensuring that the life-giving circulation continued uninterrupted. The seasonal variations in surface weather created corresponding changes in the underground air circulation. During hot summer months, the temperature difference between surface and depth created stronger upward flow, pulling fresh air down through the intake shafts and circulating it more vigorously through the city. In winter, when surface temperatures dropped, the circulation slowed but never stopped, maintaining the stable underground environment that made year-round habitation possible. Rain presented special challenges for the ventilation system. Water entering the air shafts could create blockages or worse, flood lower levels of the city. The ancient engineers addressed this problem through ingenious drainage systems built into the ventilation shafts themselves. Rainwater was collected and channeled away from the air passages, often being directed into the city's water storage systems, where it became part of the pressure supply needed for drinking, cooking, and other essential activities. The underground city's ventilation system also served as a communication network. Voices could carry through the air shafts, allowing messages to be passed between levels quickly and efficiently. This communication system was particularly important during times of danger, when the city might be sealed off from the surface and isolated. Inhabitants needed ways to coordinate their activities and share information. The psychological effects of good ventilation in the underground environment cannot be overstated. Fresh air circulation prevented the sense of suffocation and claustrophobia that might otherwise have made underground life unbearable. The gentle, constant movement of air provided a sensory connection to the world above, carrying subtle hints of surface weather, seasonal changes, and the cycle of day and night that the underground dwellers could no longer observe directly. Fire safety was another crucial consideration addressed by the ventilation system. In an environment lit entirely by oil lamps and heated by cooking fires, the risk of dangerous fires was ever present. The air circulation system was designed to prevent the accumulation of combustible gases, while ensuring that in the event of a fire, smoke would be quickly carried away from inhabited areas through the exhaust systems. The remarkable efficiency of these ancient ventilation systems becomes even more impressive when we consider the tools and knowledge available to their creators. Without mechanical fans, electric pumps, or sophisticated measuring instruments, the ancient engineers relied on careful observation, practical experimentation, and an intuitive understanding of natural forces to create systems that rival modern environmental controls in their effectiveness. As we stand in one of the deeper chambers, feeling the gentle caress of air that has traveled down from the sunlit world above, we can appreciate the profound wisdom and skill that went into creating these life support systems. Every breath we take in these depths has been made possible by the careful planning and patient execution of engineers, whose names are lost to history, but whose achievement continues to sustain life in this stone world. The air around us carries more than oxygen. It carries the breath of centuries, the whispered prayers of ancient communities, the gentle exhalations of countless souls who made their homes in these carved chambers. In our next chapter, we will follow another vital element that sustained life in the depths, water, and the ingenious systems that captured, stored, and distributed this most precious resource throughout the underground city. In the deepest chambers of Derinkuyu, where the weight of stone above presses down through countless layers, we encounter perhaps the most crucial element of underground survival: water. Here, in the Earth's embrace, ancient engineers created systems for capturing, storing, and distributing the liquid essence of life that sustained entire communities far from rivers, springs, or rainfall. The sound reaches us first, a gentle, persistent dripping that echoes through the stone corridors like a liquid heartbeat. Each drop carries with it the promise of life, the assurance that even in this buried world, the essential elements of survival flow as reliably as they do in the sunlit realm above. This is not the dramatic rush of underground rivers or the splash of mighty waterfalls, but something far more precious: the careful, measured distribution of water through systems designed to waste not a single drop. As we descend to the lowest inhabited levels of the city, our feet encounter shallow channels carved directly into the stone floors. These water channels, no more than a hand's width across and barely deep enough to cover a finger, form an intricate network that carries precious water to every corner of the underground community. The channels slope with mathematical precision, their gradients calculated to ensure steady flow without the erosion that might damage the carefully carved stone. The primary water source for Derinkuyu comes from wells that penetrate deep into the Earth's hidden aquifers. These wells represent some of the most challenging engineering accomplishments of the ancient world, carved by hand through solid rock, some descending more than 80 meters below the city's lowest level. They required years of patient labor and sophisticated understanding of geological formations. Standing at the edge of one of these ancient wells, we can hear the faint splash of water far below. The shaft disappears into darkness that seems to swallow even the brightest lamp flame. The walls of the well are polished smooth by centuries of use, worn to a gentle curve by the ropes and buckets that carried water up from the depths. Small footholds carved into the walls allowed maintenance workers to descend when necessary, though such dangerous journeys were undertaken only when absolutely required. The wellheads themselves are marvels of protective engineering. Heavy stone covers could be rolled into place to seal the water sources during times of siege or danger. These covers, weighing several tons each, required multiple people to move, but provided essential protection for the community's most vital resource. Around each wellhead, drainage channels carried away any spillage, ensuring that not even the few drops lost during water collection were wasted. The distribution system that carried water from these deep wells throughout the city demonstrates the ancient engineers' understanding of hydraulic principles that would not be formally studied for many centuries. Using nothing more than gravity and carefully calculated slopes, they created a network that delivered fresh water to every level of the 18-story underground complex. The main distribution channels follow the city's primary corridors, branching into smaller channels that serve individual neighborhoods and family quarters. At crucial junctions, the channels widen into small collecting pools where water could be temporarily stored or where community members could fill their personal water vessels. These pools, carved with smooth, rounded edges, prevented contamination while making water collection easier and more efficient. The residential water supply system required particular ingenuity. Every family dwelling, regardless of its location within the vast underground complex, needed access to clean water for drinking, cooking, and basic sanitation. The solution involved secondary and tertiary distribution channels that carried water through networks of small conduits carved behind walls and beneath floors. In the family quarters, water access points were strategically located for maximum convenience while minimizing waste. Small basins carved into wall niches allowed families to collect their daily water rations. These basins, polished smooth by countless hands and water vessels, were positioned at convenient heights for adults while remaining accessible to children learning to help with family water collection duties. The water collection ritual became an important part of daily life in the underground city. Families would send members to the distribution points at designated times, carrying clay vessels that had been crafted specifically for water transport. These vessels, with their narrow necks and carefully designed spouts, minimize spillage during transport while providing secure storage for precious water supplies. Clay water jars found throughout the residential areas reveal the careful attention paid to water storage at the family level. These vessels, ranging from small personal containers to large family storage jars, were designed with tight-fitting lids that prevented evaporation and contamination. The clay itself was specially prepared with materials that naturally purified the water, removing impurities and improving taste during extended storage. The community's approach to water conservation reveals a sophisticated understanding of resource management. Every drop was accounted for and used efficiently. Washing water was collected and reused for purposes that didn't require the highest quality. Water used for cooking was carefully measured to avoid waste while ensuring adequate preparation of meals. Even the water used for cleaning oil lamps was collected and repurposed for other cleaning tasks. Bathing in the underground city required careful planning and community cooperation. Designated bathing areas were equipped with drainage systems that carried used water to collection points where it could be filtered and reused for other purposes. The bathing chambers themselves were marvels of efficient design, with sloped floors that directed every drop of water toward collection drains, and ventilation systems that managed humidity while preventing the loss of precious heated water through excessive evaporation. The heating of water for bathing and cooking was accomplished through ingenious systems that maximized fuel efficiency while minimizing water loss. Stone heating chambers, carved adjacent to cooking areas, allowed families to warm water using the residual heat from cooking fires. These chambers, lined with smooth stone that conducted heat efficiently, could warm substantial quantities of water using minimal additional fuel. Laundry operations in the underground city required specialized water management techniques. Designated washing areas were equipped with stone basins and channels designed to contain wash water while allowing for the recovery and reuse of grey water. Clothes were washed in sequence, starting with the least soiled items and progressing to the most contaminated, maximizing the usefulness of each basin of wash water before it was directed to the reuse and recycling systems. The underground city's water systems also served crucial defensive purposes. During times of siege, when the community might be sealed off from the surface for extended periods, the reliable water supply ensured survival where surface communities might quickly succumb to thirst. The deep wells, protected within the city's fortified chambers, could not be poisoned or blocked by enemies, providing a strategic advantage that made the underground city nearly impregnable. Water quality management in the depths required constant attention and specialized knowledge. Community members were trained to recognize signs of contamination and to maintain the cleanliness of the distribution systems. Regular cleaning of channels and storage basins prevented the growth of harmful organisms, while careful monitoring of well water ensured that the community's primary water sources remained pure and safe. The seasonal management of water resources demonstrated the community's understanding of long-term planning and resource conservation. During periods when surface rainfall provided opportunities to supplement the underground water supply, collection systems channeled rainwater into the city's storage network. These seasonal additions to the water supply allowed the community to maintain larger populations during favorable years while building reserves for drier periods. Water-powered systems within the underground city reveal another dimension of the ancient engineer's ingenuity. Small water wheels, turned by the flow of carefully channeled water, provided mechanical power for grain grinding and other essential tasks. These systems, operating continuously on the steady flow of water through the distribution network, automated laborious tasks while using no additional water beyond what was already moving through the city's circulation systems. The maintenance of the water systems required specialized knowledge and dedicated community members. Water keepers, like the air keepers who maintained the ventilation systems, were trained in the complex skills needed to ensure continuous operation of the hydraulic networks. They could detect blockages by changes in flow patterns, identify leaks by subtle changes in water distribution, and perform the delicate repairs needed to keep the systems functioning properly. The acoustics of water flow through the stone channels created their own contribution to the underground city's soundscape. The gentle gurgle of water moving through channels, the soft splash of drops falling into collection basins, and the distant echo of water being drawn from deep wells provided a constant, soothing background that reminded inhabitants of the life-sustaining systems that surrounded them. Emergency water management systems ensured the community's survival even during the most challenging circumstances. Backup wells, carved to access different aquifers, provided alternative water sources if primary wells failed or became contaminated. Emergency storage chambers, carved into the deepest levels of the city, could hold enough water to sustain the population for extended periods of complete isolation. The spiritual significance of water in the underground community extended beyond its practical necessity. Water collection points often became gathering places where community members would meet and share news while filling their vessels. The rhythm of water distribution created natural breaks in the day when families would pause in their other activities to collect this essential resource, providing opportunities for social interaction and community bonding. Water ceremonies and rituals recognized the sacred nature of this life-giving resource. Special water vessels, more elaborate than those used for daily collection, were reserved for religious purposes. The blessing of water used in religious ceremonies added spiritual significance to the community's most essential physical need, creating connections between the sacred and mundane aspects of underground life. As we stand beside one of the ancient distribution channels, listening to the gentle flow of water that has sustained generations of underground dwellers, we can appreciate the remarkable achievement these systems represent. Every drop of water flowing past our feet has been captured, channeled, and distributed through human ingenuity and dedication, making possible the continuation of life in depths where water would otherwise be as rare as sunlight. In our next chapter, we will explore the underground city's remarkable storage systems, the chambers and networks that preserve food, tools, and all the material necessities of life, creating the abundance that allowed entire communities to thrive in the Earth's embrace. Deep within the carved heart of Derinkuyu, beyond the residential quarters, and beneath the sacred spaces, lie the treasure chambers of the underground city, not filled with gold or precious stones, but with something far more valuable, the stored provisions that sustained entire communities through seasons of isolation and uncertainty. Here, in chambers carved with infinite care from the living rock, ancient peoples perfected the arts of preservation and storage that made long-term underground living not merely possible, but comfortable and secure. The storage levels of the underground city reveal a sophisticated understanding of preservation science that rivals modern techniques in its effectiveness and elegance. These chambers, carved at depths where temperature and humidity remained constant throughout the year, created ideal environments for long-term food storage. The stone walls, naturally cool and dry, provided protection from the temperature fluctuations that could spoil stored provisions in surface storage facilities. As we enter the first of the great storage chambers, our eyes adjust to reveal rows upon rows of carved niches, each one sized and shaped for specific types of provisions. The largest niches, some deep enough for a person to crawl inside, were designed to hold massive clay storage jars called pithoi. These enormous vessels, some standing taller than a person, could hold hundreds of pounds of grain, oil, or other bulk foodstuffs essential for community survival. The grain storage system demonstrates the ancient engineers' mastery of preservation techniques. Wheat, barley, and other grains were stored in sealed clay vessels that protected them from moisture, pests, and contamination. The vessels themselves were often buried partially in stone-lined pits, creating additional protection while maintaining access for regular monitoring and use. Small quantities of aromatic herbs were stored with the grain to discourage insects, creating a natural pest control system that required no toxic chemicals. The grain containers reveal careful attention to practical details that ensured long-term preservation success. Each vessel had a carefully fitted lid that created an airtight seal, preventing moisture and pests from contaminating the contents. Small clay tokens or carved marks indicated the type and quantity of grain stored in each container, allowing community managers to monitor supplies without breaking the protective seals unnecessarily. The process of grain storage began with careful selection and preparation. Grain destined for long-term storage was thoroughly dried and cleaned, with damaged or inferior grains removed to prevent spoilage that could contaminate entire containers. The storage vessels were prepared with equal care, cleaned thoroughly, and sometimes seasoned with oils or herbs that provided additional preservation benefits while adding subtle flavors to the stored grain. Oil storage presented different challenges that required specialized solutions. Olive oil, the community's primary cooking fat and lamp fuel, was stored in sealed amphora that protected it from air and light that could cause rancidity. These vessels were often stored in the coolest, darkest chambers where temperature fluctuations were minimal. Small sampling vessels allowed community managers to test oil quality without exposing large quantities to air and potential contamination. The preservation of meat required perhaps the greatest ingenuity and skill. In an environment without refrigeration, meat preservation relied on techniques of sorting, smoking, and drying that concentrated flavors while extending storage life. Dedicated chambers were carved with controlled ventilation that allowed the slow air circulation needed for proper meat curing while preventing contamination from pests or excessive humidity. Cheese storage chambers reveal another dimension of underground food preservation. These chambers, carved with specific attention to humidity control and air circulation, created ideal environments for aging cheeses that would improve with time. Stone shelves, carved directly from the chamber walls, provided storage surfaces that maintained proper temperature while allowing air circulation around the aging cheeses. The storage of preserved vegetables and fruits required different environmental controls. Root vegetables were stored in sand-filled chambers that maintained proper moisture levels while preventing rot. Dried fruits and vegetables were kept in sealed containers that protected them from moisture while maintaining the concentrated flavors and nutrients that made them valuable additions to the underground community's diet. Wine storage in the underground city created some of the most sophisticated preservation chambers. These cellars, carved at depths where temperature remained constantly cool, provided ideal conditions for wine aging. Stone racks held clay amphora in positions that prevented sediment disturbance while allowing easy access for sampling and use. The constant temperature and humidity of these chambers created wines that could age for years, improving in quality and providing the community with luxury that rivaled the finest surface establishments. Honey storage required protection from both moisture and crystallization that could make this precious sweetener difficult to use. Sealed vessels, often made from specially prepared clay that prevented moisture absorption, kept honey in perfect condition for extended periods. The antimicrobial properties of honey made it an important food preservation agent as well as a sweetener, used to preserve other foods and provide medicinal benefits to the community. The storage of herbs and medicinal plants required specialized knowledge and careful environmental control. Dedicated chambers with controlled air circulation allowed proper drying and curing of medicinal herbs while preventing mold growth that could destroy their therapeutic properties. These chambers, often located near the community's healing centers, provided easy access to the remedies needed for maintaining community health. Tool storage chambers reveal the practical needs of a self-sufficient underground community. Stone tools, metal implements, and wooden utensils were stored in organized systems that protected them from damage while ensuring easy access when needed. Specialized racks and storage systems, carved directly from the chamber walls, held tools in positions that prevented damage while making inventory management efficient and reliable. The storage of raw materials for crafts and manufacturing filled numerous specialized chambers throughout the underground city. Clay for pottery was stored in controlled humidity environments that kept it workable for extended periods. Metals were protected from corrosion in dry chambers, while wood was seasoned and stored in ways that prevented warping and cracking. These raw material storage systems ensured that the community could continue manufacturing essential items even during extended periods of isolation. Textile storage required protection from moisture and pests that could destroy valuable cloth and clothing. Cedar-lined chambers provided natural pest resistance while maintaining proper humidity levels for long-term textile preservation. Finished clothing was stored with aromatic herbs that discouraged insects, while adding pleasant scents to garments that might otherwise develop musty odors in the underground environment. The organization of storage chambers reveals sophisticated inventory management systems that ensured efficient use of stored resources. Color-coded markings, carved symbols, and standardized container systems allowed community managers to track inventory levels and rotate stored goods to ensure freshness. Regular inventory cycles ensured that stored provisions were used before they could spoil, while maintaining adequate reserves for emergency situations. Water storage systems integrated closely with the food preservation chambers, providing the moisture control needed for various preservation techniques while ensuring adequate water supplies for food preparation. Stone-lined cisterns, carved adjacent to food storage areas, provided convenient access to the water needed for reconstituting dried foods while maintaining the separation needed to prevent contamination. The loading and unloading of storage chambers required careful planning and community cooperation. Access corridors wide enough for people carrying heavy loads connected the storage areas to the residential and cooking areas. Stone ramps and steps were carved with non-slip surfaces that provided secure footing, even when carrying heavy containers of stored provisions. Ventilation systems serving the storage chambers were designed to prevent spoilage while maintaining security. Air circulation prevented the accumulation of moisture and stale air that could promote decay, while controlled access ensured that valuable stores could not be contaminated or stolen. These systems operated continuously but quietly, providing the environmental control needed for long-term preservation without drawing attention to the valuable supplies they protected. The psychological impact of well-stocked storage chambers on the underground community cannot be understated. The knowledge that adequate provisions were available, properly stored and carefully managed, provided security that allowed the community to face uncertain times with confidence. The sight of orderly storage chambers, filled with the necessities of life, reassured community members that they could survive whatever challenges might arise. Storage chamber maintenance required specialized knowledge and constant attention. Community members trained in preservation techniques monitored stored provisions regularly, detecting early signs of spoilage or contamination before they could spread to other stores. This preventive maintenance approach maximized the useful life of stored provisions while minimizing waste of precious resources. The seasonal management of storage systems reflected the community's understanding of natural cycles and preservation requirements. Harvest seasons brought intensive storage activities as fresh provisions were preserved and added to the community's reserves. Throughout the year, careful rotation of stored goods ensured optimal freshness while maintaining adequate emergency reserves. Emergency storage protocols ensured community survival during the most challenging circumstances. Critical provisions were distributed among multiple storage locations to prevent total loss if any single chamber was compromised. Emergency rations, preserved using the most reliable techniques available, provided backup supplies that could sustain the community even if primary storage systems failed. As we move through these chambers of provision, surrounded by the ingenious systems that sustained life in the depths, we can appreciate the remarkable foresight and skill that went into creating these underground treasuries. Every stored grain, every preserved fruit, every carefully maintained tool represents the community's commitment to not merely surviving in the depths, but thriving with abundance and security that freed them to pursue the higher purposes of learning, craftsmanship, and spiritual growth. In our next chapter, we will explore the workshops and manufacturing centers where the underground community created the goods and tools that sustained their civilization, transforming raw materials into the necessities and luxuries that made underground life not just tolerable, but genuinely rewarding. In the heart of Derinkuyu's middle levels, where the residential quarters give way to communal spaces, we discover the workshops that form the economic and creative soul of the underground city. Here, in chambers carved with particular attention to the needs of various crafts, artisans practiced trades that had been refined through generations of underground living. The gentle rhythm of skilled hands at work created a symphony of productivity that echoed softly through the stone corridors, marking the passage of days with the steady progress of essential crafts. The pottery workshops occupy some of the most ingeniously designed chambers in the entire underground complex. Here, the ancient engineers faced the challenge of providing kilns capable of reaching the high temperatures necessary for ceramic production, while managing the smoke and heat in the confined underground environment. The solution reveals a sophisticated understanding of both ceramics and ventilation engineering that rivals modern industrial design. The pottery kilns themselves are marvels of efficient design, carved directly into the stone walls with firing chambers that could reach temperatures exceeding 1000 degrees Celsius. The kilns are connected to dedicated exhaust systems that draw smoke and heat directly to the surface through separate ventilation shafts, preventing contamination of the general air circulation while maintaining comfortable working conditions for the potters. Around each kiln, work surfaces carved from this stone provide stable platforms for pottery creation. These surfaces, polished smooth through generations of use, offer the flat, steady support needed for throwing pots on wheels powered by foot pedals. Storage niches built into the walls hold the potter's tools, simple implements of wood, bone, and stone that shaped clay into vessels of remarkable beauty and functionality. The clay preparation areas demonstrate the potter's understanding of material science. Here, different types of clay were mixed and aged to achieve the proper plasticity and firing characteristics needed for various types of pottery. Stone basins allowed the clay to be mixed with water and other additives, while aging chambers provided controlled environments where clay could develop the workability that distinguished master potters' materials from amateur attempts. The pottery workshops produced a remarkable variety of vessels essential for underground life. Water jars, oil lamps, cooking pots, storage containers, and serving dishes emerged from these workshops in steady production that supplied the entire community's ceramic needs. Each type of vessel required different clay mixtures, firing temperatures, and finishing techniques that demonstrated the potter's mastery of their complex craft. Oil lamp production received particular attention in the underground workshops, as these small ceramic vessels provided the primary lighting for the entire city. The lamp makers developed standardized designs that maximize light output while minimizing oil consumption. Special attention was paid to the lamp's wick holes and oil reservoirs, ensuring proper flame control and extended burning times that made the precious oil supplies last as long as possible. The metalworking workshops reveal another dimension of underground craftsmanship, though metal production was necessarily limited by the challenges of obtaining raw materials and managing the intense heat required for working iron and bronze. The metalworkers focused on essential items, tools, weapons, and hardware needed for daily life rather than decorative items that consumed materials without providing essential utility. The forge areas are equipped with specialized ventilation systems that manage both heat and smoke production. Bellows systems, powered by human labor, provided the concentrated airflow needed to achieve forging temperatures, while smoke removal systems carried away the toxic fumes produced by metalworking. The forges themselves are carved into stone supports that could withstand the extreme temperatures while providing stable work surfaces for shaping hot metal. Tool production occupied much of the metalworkers' time and skill. Knives for food preparation, tools for leather working, implements for farming and construction, and weapons for defense all required the specialized knowledge of metallurgy and the patient skill of forging. Each tool was individually crafted to serve specific purposes, with attention to balance, durability, and efficiency that made them superior to mass-produced alternatives. The woodworking shops faced the unique challenge of working with materials that had to be carefully imported from the surface world. Every piece of wood was precious in the underground environment, requiring master craftsmen who could create essential items with minimal waste. The woodworkers specialized in creating furniture, tool handles, and structural elements that made underground life more comfortable and efficient. Wood seasoning and storage chambers adjacent to the workshops provided controlled environments where imported lumber could be properly dried and prepared for use. These chambers maintain the proper humidity and air circulation needed to prevent warping and cracking while keeping the wood workable for extended periods. The careful management of wood resources ensured that every piece could be used to maximum advantage. The woodworking tools themselves were marvels of efficiency and precision. Hand planes, chisels, saws, and measuring devices were crafted with the same attention to quality that characterized all underground craftsmanship. These tools, passed down from master to apprentice, represented generations of refinement that achieved remarkable precision and durability. Furniture production focused on essential items that served multiple purposes while using wood resources efficiently. Beds that could serve as seating during the day, tables that could be disassembled for storage, and shelving systems that maximized storage while minimizing material use demonstrated the woodworker's skill at creating functional beauty within the constraints of underground living. The textile workshops produced the cloth and clothing essential for underground life. Here, spinning wheels powered by hand or foot produced thread from fibers that were often grown in the underground city's own gardens or imported from the surface world. The spinning areas were positioned near sources of good light from oil lamps, allowing workers to maintain the consistent thread quality needed for fine weaving. Weaving looms, constructed from precious wood and operated by skilled weavers, produced cloth for clothing, bedding, and household needs. The looms themselves were engineering marvels, designed to be disassembled and stored when not in use, making efficient use of the limited space available in the workshops. The weavers produced both utilitarian cloth for daily wear and finer fabrics for special occasions and ceremonial use. Dyeing operations required specialized knowledge and careful environmental controls. Natural dyes were prepared from plants, minerals, and other materials, often requiring complex processes of preparation and application. The dyeing chambers were equipped with drainage systems that managed the water used in the dyeing process while preventing contamination of the general water supply. Clothing production combined the skills of multiple craftspeople, from the fiber producers to the weavers to the tailors who created finished garments. The clothing styles developed in the underground city reflected both practical needs and aesthetic preferences, creating garments that were suitable for the underground environment while maintaining the cultural identity of the community. Leather working required specialized tools and techniques adapted to underground conditions. The leather workers processed hides imported from the surface, transforming them into essential items like water containers, clothing, tool cases, and other leather goods needed for daily life. The leather working areas were equipped with ventilation systems that managed the odors produced by leather processing while maintaining comfortable working conditions. The tanning process required careful chemical management using materials like oak bark, alum, and other tanning agents that preserved the leather while making it suitable for various uses. Tanning pits carved into stone floors provided controlled environments where hides could be processed through the complex series of treatments needed to produce high-quality leather. Leather goods production emphasized durability and functionality over decoration. Water bags, tool belts, clothing, and footwear were crafted to withstand the demands of underground life while providing comfort and utility. The leather workers developed specialized techniques for waterproofing, reinforcement, and repair. Leather goods production emphasized durability and functionality over decoration. Water bags, tool belts, clothing, and footwear were crafted to withstand the demands of underground life while providing comfort and utility. The leather workers developed specialized techniques for waterproofing, reinforcement, and repair that ensured leather goods could serve for many years before requiring replacement. The bone and horn working shops utilized materials that were byproducts of food preparation, demonstrating the underground community's efficient use of all available resources. Skilled craftsmen carved bone into needles, buttons, tool handles, and decorative items that added beauty to daily life. Horn was shaped into containers, spoons, and other implements that combined functionality with natural elegance. Stoneworking continued even within the underground city, as craftsmen refined and maintained the carved chambers while creating smaller stone implements. Stone carving tools, grinding stones, and decorative elements were produced in workshops equipped with the specialized tools needed for working the hard volcanic rock that surrounded the community. Apprenticeship systems in all workshops ensured the continuation of essential crafts from generation to generation. Master craftsmen took on young apprentices who learned not just the technical skills of their trades, but the wisdom of resource management, quality control, and innovation that kept the craft evolving and improving over time. The workshops operated on schedules that reflected the rhythm of underground life, rather than the cycles of day and night. Work periods were determined by the availability of materials, the needs of the community, and the energy levels of the craftsmen, creating a flexible system that maximized productivity while maintaining the quality standards that characterized all underground craftsmanship. Tool maintenance and repair services provided essential support for all the workshops and for the community as a whole. Skilled repair craftsmen could restore damaged tools, sharpen cutting edges, and modify existing implements to serve new purposes, extending the useful life of valuable tools and reducing the need for costly replacements. In the depths of Derinkuyu, where sunlight never penetrates and soil exists only where human hands have carried it, ancient agricultural pioneers created growing systems that sustained entire communities with fresh produce. These underground gardens, carved from stone and nurtured with infinite patience, represent one of humanity's most remarkable achievements in adapting food production to impossible environments. The agricultural chambers occupy strategic locations throughout the underground city, positioned to take advantage of water distribution systems while maintaining access to the specialized care these growing areas required. Here, in chambers where the ceiling height has been increased to accommodate growing plants, we discover growing systems that combined innovative engineering with deep understanding of plant biology. The soil preparation for underground agriculture required enormous effort and sophisticated understanding of plant nutrition. Earth was carried down from the surface, basketful by basketful, through the narrow corridors and steep stairs that connected the underground city to the world above. This precious soil was then mixed with organic matter produced within the city food scraps, human and animal waste, and other organic materials that could be composted to create rich growing medium. Composting systems within the underground city transformed waste materials into fertile soil amendments through carefully managed decomposition processes. Composting chambers, equipped with ventilation systems that managed odors while providing the air circulation needed for proper decomposition, produced steady supplies of rich compost that enhanced the imported soil and made intensive agriculture possible in the stone environment. The growing beds themselves were marvels of efficient design, carved directly into stone floors or constructed from carefully fitted stone blocks that created raised growing areas. These beds were designed with drainage systems that prevented waterlogging while conserving precious water resources. The depth and width of each bed was calculated to provide adequate root space for specific crops while maximizing the growing area within the limited space available. Water management for the underground gardens required sophisticated irrigation systems that delivered precisely measured quantities of water to each growing area. Channels carved into the stone floors carried water from the main distribution system to individual beds, where small gates controlled the flow to provide exactly the amount of moisture needed for optimal plant growth without waste. The crops grown in these underground gardens were carefully selected for their ability to thrive in low light conditions and their nutritional value to the community. Mushrooms, which could grow without any light, were cultivated in specialized chambers where humidity and temperature were carefully controlled. Various fungi provided protein, vitamins, and flavors that enhanced the underground diet while requiring minimal resources. Root vegetables like turnips, radishes, and onions could produce edible crops even in the dim light provided by oil lamps. These vegetables were particularly valuable because they could be harvested gradually, allowing a single plant to provide food over an extended period while continuing to grow and produce. The storage roots also provided essential carbohydrates and vitamins that supplemented the grain-based diet. Leafy greens grew surprisingly well in the underground environment when provided with adequate water and the limited light available from oil lamps positioned strategically around the growing beds. Lettuce, spinach, and various herb plants provided fresh vegetables that prevented nutritional deficiencies while adding flavor and variety to meals prepared in the underground kitchens. Herb gardens occupied special positions in the agricultural chambers, providing both culinary and medicinal plants essential for community health. Basil, parsley, thyme, and other aromatic herbs grew well in containers positioned near oil lamps, their concentrated flavors enhanced by the controlled growing conditions. These herbs were essential for food preservation as well as flavoring, their natural antimicrobial properties helping to extend the storage life of prepared foods. Medicinal plants received particular attention in the underground gardens, as the community's health depended on maintaining supplies of therapeutic herbs without access to surface gathering areas. Plants with healing properties were cultivated with special care, their growing conditions optimized to maximize the concentration of beneficial compounds while ensuring reliable harvests of essential medicines. The lighting systems for underground agriculture represented innovative solutions to the challenge of growing plants without sunlight. Oil lamps positioned on reflective surfaces concentrated available light on growing plants, while mirrors made from polished metal directed light into growing areas that would otherwise remain too dark for plant growth. The placement and management of these lighting systems required constant attention and adjustment to provide optimal growing conditions. Seed production and storage ensured the continuation of underground agriculture from generation to generation. Selected plants were allowed to mature fully and produce seeds, which were then harvested, dried, and stored using preservation techniques that maintained their viability for extended periods. Seed storage chambers provided controlled environments that protected these precious genetic resources from moisture, pests, and temperature fluctuations. Crop rotation systems maximized soil fertility while preventing the buildup of pests and diseases that could threaten the underground gardens. Different crops were planted in sequence in each growing bed, with nitrogen-fixing plants like beans and peas alternating with heavy feeding crops like leafy greens. This rotation system maintained soil health while maximizing production from the limited growing space available. Pest management in the underground gardens relied on integrated approaches that combined cultural practices, beneficial organisms, and natural pest deterrents. The enclosed environment of the underground city actually provided advantages for pest control, as harmful insects could be excluded more easily than in surface agriculture, while beneficial organisms could be maintained in controlled populations that provided natural pest control. Pollination services for crops that required cross-fertilization were provided by hand pollination techniques that ensured reliable fruit and seed production without dependence on insect pollinators. Community members trained in plant biology performed the delicate work of transferring pollen between flowers, ensuring that crops like beans and squash could produce their full harvest. Container growing systems allowed for intensive agriculture in areas where permanent growing beds were not practical. Clay pots and wooden boxes provided portable growing environments that could be moved to take advantage of available light or to accommodate other uses of the growing chambers. These container systems also allowed for better soil management and easier plant care. Seasonal management of the underground gardens followed different patterns than surface agriculture, as the stable underground environment eliminated many of the environmental stresses that drove surface growing seasons. However, crop planning still followed natural rhythms based on plant biology and community food needs, with succession planting ensuring continuous harvests of fresh produce throughout the year. Harvest processing and distribution integrated closely with the food storage and preparation systems throughout the underground city. Fresh produce was delivered to kitchens while surplus crops were processed for preservation through drying, fermentation, or other techniques that extended their useful life. This integration ensured that nothing was wasted while maintaining optimal nutrition for the community. The social aspects of underground agriculture created opportunities for community cooperation and knowledge sharing. Garden maintenance was often a communal activity that brought together people of different ages and backgrounds, fostering the exchange of agricultural knowledge while maintaining the growing systems that sustained the entire community. Training and education in agricultural techniques ensured that essential growing knowledge was preserved and transmitted to new generations. Experienced gardeners taught younger community members the skills needed to maintain the underground growing systems, from soil preparation and planting to pest management and harvest processing. Innovation and experimentation in the underground gardens led to continuous improvements in growing techniques and crop selection. Community gardeners tested new growing methods, tried different crop varieties, and developed improved techniques that increased yields while reducing resource requirements. This spirit of innovation kept the agricultural systems evolving and adapting to changing conditions and needs. Water recycling systems connected the agricultural chambers to other water uses throughout the underground city, creating closed-loop systems that maximized the use of every drop of precious water. Grey water from washing and cooking operations was filtered and reused for irrigation, while drainage from growing beds was collected and treated for reuse in other applications. The psychological benefits of underground gardens extended far beyond their nutritional contributions to the community. The presence of growing plants provided connection to natural cycles and living systems that helped maintain mental health in the confined underground environment. The care and nurturing of plants offered satisfying work that produced visible results, contributing to community morale and individual well-being. Deep within the stone corridors of Derinkuyu, where the gentle rhythms of daily life flow like underground streams, we encounter the remarkable defensive systems that transformed this underground city into an impregnable fortress. Here, ancient military engineers created security measures so sophisticated and effective that they could protect 20,000 inhabitants from any threat that might emerge from the turbulent world above. The defensive philosophy of Derinkuyu was based not on aggressive fortification, but on the principle of invisibility and impenetrability. The city's greatest protection came from its hidden nature from the surface. The entrances appeared to be nothing more than ordinary caves or storage cellars, giving no indication of the vast community that lay concealed beneath the earth. The primary entrance systems demonstrate the subtle genius of underground defensive architecture. Each entrance could be sealed by massive stone doors that rolled into position with surprising ease, despite their enormous weight. These circular stone barriers, some weighing several tons, were balanced and mounted on pivot systems that allowed a small number of defenders to seal the entrance quickly and completely. The entrance doors themselves were engineering marvels that combined strength with deception. From the outside, when sealed, they appeared to be natural rock formations or simple cave closures. No external hardware or obvious mechanisms revealed their true nature or suggested that they protected anything more valuable than ordinary storage spaces. This camouflage was essential to the city's defense, as enemies who could not locate the entrances could not threaten the community within. Behind the main doors, the entrance passages followed deliberately confusing paths that served multiple defensive purposes. The corridors twisted and turned, branching and rejoining in patterns that would confuse unfamiliar intruders while remaining navigable to residents who knew the proper routes. Dead-end passages and false corridors led potential attackers away from the vital areas of the city, while providing opportunities for defenders to observe and respond to threats. The narrow width of the entrance corridors created natural choke points where small numbers of defenders could hold of much larger attacking forces. These passages, barely wide enough for two people to pass, eliminated the numerical advantages that attacking armies might possess while providing defenders with protected positions from which they could engage enemies who were forced to advance in single file. Communication systems throughout the defensive network allowed defenders to coordinate their response to threats while maintaining the element of surprise. Message passages, too narrow for armed combat, but adequate for passing information, connected defensive positions throughout the city. Acoustic systems amplified whispered messages through stone channels, allowing silent communication that would not reveal defensive positions to attacking forces. The ventilation shafts that provided life-sustaining air circulation also served crucial defensive functions. These shafts could be used to observe surface conditions without exposing defenders to enemy view. During sieges, the ventilation system continued to provide fresh air while surface defenders might be forced to rely on increasingly stale air in their fortifications. Trap systems built into the defensive corridors provided additional protection against intruders who might breach the outer defenses. Stone blocks could be triggered to fall across passages, sealing off sections of the city or crushing attackers who had penetrated the outer defenses. These traps were designed to be activated by defenders and reset after use, providing renewable defensive capabilities. Water systems played crucial roles in the city's defensive strategy. The deep wells that provided drinking water could not be poisoned or blocked by surface enemies, ensuring that the community could survive extended sieges without dependence on external water sources. During conflicts, when surface water sources might be contaminated or controlled by enemies, the underground city's independent water supply provided strategic advantages that were often decisive. Food storage systems ensured that the community could survive months or even years of complete isolation from surface supply lines. The massive storage chambers, filled with preserved grains, dried meat, and other long-lasting provisions, provided security against siege tactics that might starve surface communities into submission. The preservation techniques perfected in the underground city created food supplies that could sustain large populations for extended periods. Weapon storage and manufacturing facilities within the city provided defenders with the tools needed to protect their community. Armories carved into secure chambers held weapons and armor for the city's defenders, while metalworking shops could produce additional weapons and repair damaged equipment during extended conflicts. The combination of stored weapons and manufacturing capability ensured that defensive capacity could be maintained even during prolonged sieges. The city's defensive organization relied on community participation rather than professional military forces. Every adult resident understood their role in the defensive plan and knew the locations of their assigned positions during emergencies. This community-based defense system created defensive capabilities that were both comprehensive and sustainable, as every resident had personal investment in the city's protection. Training systems ensured that defensive skills were maintained and transmitted to new generations. Regular exercises tested the community's ability to seal entrances, man defensive positions, and coordinate response to various threat scenarios. These training activities were conducted quietly and efficiently, maintaining the defensive readiness without creating obvious military activities that might attract unwanted attention from potential enemies. Intelligence gathering from the surface world provided early warning of potential threats. Community members who traveled to surface settlements gathered information about political conditions, military movements, and other factors that might affect the underground city's security. This intelligence network allowed the community to prepare for threats before they materialized, often avoiding conflicts through early preparation and strategic withdrawal. The psychological aspects of underground defense created additional advantages for the defending community. Attackers who managed to penetrate the outer defenses found themselves in an alien environment where they were completely disadvantaged. The darkness, confined spaces, and unfamiliar architecture created stress and disorientation that undermined attacking forces while providing familiar, comfortable conditions for defenders. Emergency evacuation systems provided options for community survival even if the main defensive systems were overwhelmed. Secondary exits, hidden from surface view and protected by their own defensive measures, allowed the community to withdraw to alternative locations if their primary stronghold became untenable. These evacuation routes were kept secret and maintained in constant readiness for emergency use. Supply caching systems extended the community's defensive capabilities beyond the boundaries of the main underground city. Hidden caches of food, water, weapons, and other essential supplies were maintained at strategic locations that could support the community during evacuation or extended conflict. These supply points provided fallback resources that ensured survival even in worst-case scenarios. The defensive use of lighting systems created advantages for defenders while disadvantaging attackers. Community members who knew the city's layout could navigate effectively using minimal light, while intruders required brighter illumination that made them visible targets. The strategic placement and control of oil lamps could create tactical advantages that multiplied the effectiveness of defensive forces. Smoke and fire defensive systems provided additional protection against attacking forces. Combustible material stored in strategic locations could be ignited to create smoke screens that confused attackers while providing cover for defensive movements. These systems were designed to use the city's ventilation network to direct smoke toward enemy positions while protecting friendly areas. Medical facilities within the defensive network ensured that wounded defenders could receive treatment without leaving their defensive positions. Medical supplies and trained healers were positioned throughout the city to provide care for injuries while maintaining defensive readiness. These medical systems reduced the impact of casualties on overall defensive effectiveness. The integration of defensive systems with daily life activities ensured that security measures did not interfere with normal community functions. Defensive positions were incorporated into residential and work areas in ways that provided protection without disrupting the peaceful activities that sustained community life. This integration allowed the city to maintain both security and quality of life simultaneously. Maintenance of defensive systems received continuous attention from specialized community members who understood the complex mechanisms and systems that protected the city. Regular inspection and maintenance of stone doors, trap mechanisms, weapon storage, and communication systems ensured that defensive capabilities remained effective even after years of peaceful conditions. The legacy of Derinkuyu's defensive systems demonstrates the effectiveness of well-planned, community-based security measures. The city successfully protected its inhabitants through centuries of political upheaval and military conflict, providing security that allowed the community to thrive and prosper even in times when surface communities faced constant threats and uncertainty. In the gentle embrace of carved stone, where time flows differently than in the sunlit world above, the daily rhythms of life in Derinkuyu followed patterns as ancient and reliable as the movement of underground waters. Here, 20,000 souls created routines that sustained not just individual lives, but an entire civilization that thrived in perpetual twilight. measuring days not by the sun's passage, but by the quiet heartbeat of community life. The awakening of the underground city began not with dawn's light, but with the soft stirring of families in their stone chambers. Children would wake to the gentle touch of parents who had learned to rise by internal rhythms refined through generations of underground living. The first sounds of the day were not birdsong or roosters calling, but the quiet murmur of voices, the soft shuffle of feet on stone floors, and the gentle crackle of kindling being coaxed into flame for the morning cooking fires. Morning preparations in the underground city required careful coordination of limited resources. Water for washing had to be collected from the community distribution points, a task that often fell to older children who would carry clay vessels through the corridors, their footsteps echoing softly in the stone passages. The morning water collection became a social ritual where news and plans for the day were shared in whispered conversations that respected the sleep of neighbors in adjacent chambers. Breakfast preparation involved the community cooking facilities where families took turns using the shared ovens and cooking fires. The morning meal was typically simple porridge made from stored grains, perhaps enhanced with honey or dried fruits, accompanied by herbal teas brewed from plants grown in the underground gardens. The cooking areas filled with the quiet sounds of food preparation, grain being ground, water boiling, and the soft conversations of neighbors preparing their morning meals. The workday in Derinkuyu began with the natural sorting of community members toward their various responsibilities. Craftsmen made their way to workshops where oil lamps were lit and tools prepared for another day of patient creation. Farmers tended the underground gardens, checking moisture levels, adjusting lamp positions, and harvesting produce that would supplement the day's meals. Storage keepers inspected the preservation chambers, rotating supplies and monitoring the precious reserves that sustained the community. Children's education took place in dedicated chambers where oil lamps provided enough light for learning activities. Here, young people learn not just reading, writing, and arithmetic, but the specialized knowledge needed for underground living. They studied the water distribution systems, learned to identify different types of stored foods, and practiced the crafts that would sustain the community's economy. Education was practical and comprehensive, preparing each child to contribute meaningfully to the community's survival and prosperity. The midday meal brought the community together in a celebration of shared abundance. Families gathered in the common dining areas where tables carved from stone provided gathering places for leisurely meals. The food was simple but nourishing: bread baked in the community ovens, vegetables from the underground gardens, preserved meats and cheese from the storage chambers, all prepared with herbs that added flavor and nutritional value to the underground diet. Afternoon activities in the underground city reflected the community's commitment to both practical necessity and cultural enrichment. While some members continued their work in workshops and gardens, others engaged in activities that sustained the social and spiritual life of the community. Storytellers shared tales that preserved cultural memory and entertained all ages. Musicians played simple instruments: flutes, small drums, stringed instruments that filled the stone chambers with gentle melodies. The afternoon was also time for maintenance activities that kept the underground city functioning properly. Teams of workers cleaned the water channels, trimmed lamp wicks, swept corridors, and performed the countless small tasks that maintained the complex systems supporting underground life. These maintenance activities were often communal, with neighbors working together while sharing conversation and strengthening social bonds. Craft activities occupied much of the afternoon time for many community members. In the workshops, potters shaped clay into essential vessels. Weavers worked at looms producing cloth, and metalworkers forged tools and implements needed for daily life. The pace of work was unhurried but steady, allowing craftsmen to focus on quality while maintaining the production levels needed to supply community needs. The underground gardens required constant attention throughout the day. Gardeners monitored moisture levels, adjusted lighting, harvested produce, and tended the plants that provided fresh food for the community. The garden areas became gathering places where people working with plants could share knowledge and enjoy the psychological benefits of nurturing growing things in the stone environment. Evening meal preparation began in the late afternoon, with families and cooking groups preparing more elaborate meals than the simple morning fare. The evening meal was the primary social event of the day, when extended families and friendship groups gather to share food and conversation. The cooking areas filled with the aromas of more complex dishes, stews, roasted meats, bread fresh from the ovens, and special preparations that used the community's precious spices and seasonings. The evening meal itself was a leisurely affair that could last for hours, without the pressure of daylight fading. Families and friends could extend their dining and conversation as long as they wished. The dining areas filled with the gentle sounds of shared meals, quiet conversation, soft laughter, the clink of pottery vessels, and the comfortable sounds of community members enjoying each other's company. After the evening meal, the underground city entered its most social period. This was time for visiting between families, for sharing news and plans, for engaging in the social activities that maintain community bonds. Some gatherings centered around music, with community members singing traditional songs or playing instruments in informal concerts that brought people together in shared cultural expression. Storytelling formed an essential part of evening activities, preserving cultural traditions while entertaining community members of all ages. Master storytellers would gather audiences in chambers designated for such gatherings, their voices carrying ancient tales through the stone spaces. These stories served multiple purposes: entertainment, education, cultural preservation, and the strengthening of community identity through shared narrative traditions. Religious observances marked the rhythm of many evenings, with community members gathering in the chapels for prayer, meditation, and spiritual instruction. These religious activities provided structure to community life while addressing the spiritual needs that sustained people through the challenges of underground living. The evening prayers became bookends to the day, providing closure and preparation for the rest that lay ahead. Children's bedtime routines in the underground city involved the gentle transition from active day to peaceful night. Parents would settle children in their sleeping chambers with quiet stories, soft songs, or simple conversations about the day's activities. The bedtime rituals helped children feel secure in the stone environment, while preparing them for sleep in chambers where the darkness was absolute once the oil lamps were extinguished. Adult evening activities often continued after children were settled for sleep. This was time for more serious conversations about community affairs, planning for future projects, or engaging in adult social activities that strengthened relationships between community members. The evening hours provided opportunities for the kind of deep social connection that sustained community cohesion through challenging times. Preparation for sleep in the underground city involved careful attention to the oil lamps that provided light and warmth. Lamps in sleeping areas were gradually extinguished, leaving only those needed for safety and security throughout the night. Community members responsible for night security would take their positions, ensuring that the city remained protected while most inhabitants slept. The transition to sleep in Derinkuyu was gradual and peaceful. Without the stimulation of changing light or external noise, community members could settle into rest at their own pace. The stone chambers provided excellent sound insulation, allowing families to sleep undisturbed by activities in adjacent areas. The constant temperature and humidity created comfortable sleeping conditions that promoted restful sleep. Night activities in the underground city were minimal but essential. Security personnel maintained their vigilant watch, while those responsible for critical systems checked water flow, ventilation, and storage areas. These night duties were rotated among community members, ensuring that everyone shared the responsibility for maintaining the systems that sustained underground life. The weekly rhythm of life in Derinkuyu followed patterns that reflected both practical needs and cultural traditions. Certain days were designated for major cleaning activities, when the entire community participated in maintaining the cleanliness and order essential for healthy living in confined spaces. Other days were marked by special cooking activities, community meetings, or religious observances that provided structure to the passage of time. Seasonal observances in the underground city created connections to the natural world, even though the community was isolated from direct experience of seasonal changes. Information from surface contacts allowed the community to maintain awareness of seasonal cycles, which were marked by special meals, decorative activities, and celebrations that preserved cultural connections to the changing year. The social hierarchy in Derinkuyu was based on contribution and expertise rather than inherited status. Community members who possessed essential skills or who took responsibility for important community functions received recognition and respect, but the underground environment encouraged cooperation and mutual support rather than competition or conflict. Conflict resolution in the close quarters of underground living required sophisticated social skills and community institutions. Disputes were handled through discussion and mediation rather than confrontation, with community elders and respected members helping to resolve differences before they could disrupt community harmony. The underground environment made cooperation essential for survival, providing strong incentives for peaceful conflict resolution. The pace of life in Derinkuyu was measured and deliberate, without the urgency that characterized surface communities facing external pressures and natural dangers. This slower pace allowed for careful attention to quality in all activities, from craftsmanship to food preparation to social relationships. The community could focus on creating meaningful, sustainable ways of life, rather than merely surviving from day to day. As our gentle journey through the depths of Derinkuyu draws to its close, we find ourselves standing in one of the deepest chambers of this remarkable underground city, surrounded by the profound silence that has witnessed centuries of human life, innovation, and community. Here, in these carved stone depths, we can feel the weight of history and the whispered voices of the 20,000 souls who once called these chambers home. The legacy of Derinkuyu extends far beyond its impressive engineering achievements, though these remain remarkable by any standard. This underground city represents one of humanity's most successful experiments in sustainable community living, demonstrating principles of resource management, social cooperation, and environmental adaptation that remain relevant to our modern world. The ancient builders created not just shelter from external dangers, but a complete civilization that could thrive independently for generations. The engineering principles embedded in Derinkuyu's design reveal sophisticated understanding of physics, chemistry, and biology that was applied practically centuries before these sciences were formally studied. The ventilation systems demonstrate mastery of fluid dynamics. The water management shows hydraulic engineering expertise, and the preservation systems reveal deep knowledge of chemistry and microbiology. These achievements were accomplished through careful observation, practical experimentation, and the accumulated wisdom of generations. The social innovations of underground city living may be even more remarkable than the engineering achievements. Here, ancient peoples created democratic communities that functioned through cooperation rather than coercion, where individual skills were valued while community welfare remained paramount. The absence of defensive architecture within the city itself suggests a society that had largely eliminated internal conflict through effective social institutions and shared values. The environmental sustainability of Derinkuyu offers lessons that resonate powerfully with contemporary concerns about resource consumption and environmental impact. The underground city operated as a closed-loop system where waste from one process became input for another, where energy use was minimized through efficient design, and where resource consumption was carefully managed to ensure long-term sustainability. The community achieved abundance through efficiency rather than exploitation. The cultural achievements of the underground cities demonstrate that physical isolation need not mean cultural poverty. The communities that thrived in these depths created rich traditions of craftsmanship, music, storytelling, and spiritual practice that sustained meaningful lives even in confined spaces. They prove that human creativity and cultural expression can flourish anywhere that communities provide security, cooperation, and shared purpose. The preservation techniques perfected in Derinkuyu allowed not just food and materials to survive for extended periods, but cultural knowledge and practices as well. The training systems that passed skills from master to apprentice ensured that essential knowledge survived even during periods of external chaos and disruption. The underground cities served as cultural repositories that preserved civilization during times when surface communities faced destruction and loss. The defensive strategies of Derinkuyu demonstrate alternatives to aggressive militarism that proved remarkably effective over many centuries. Rather than building massive fortifications or maintaining large armies, the underground cities achieved security through concealment, self-sufficiency, and community resilience. Their defensive success came from making themselves invulnerable rather than making their enemies vulnerable. The educational systems of the underground cities created remarkably well-rounded citizens who possessed both practical skills and cultural knowledge. Every community member understood multiple aspects of underground life, from basic maintenance and food production to specialized crafts and cultural practices. This comprehensive education created communities that were both resilient and adaptable, capable of responding effectively to changing circumstances. The healthcare approaches developed in underground cities combined practical medicine with preventive care that maintained community health in challenging environments. The emphasis on sanitation, nutrition, and disease prevention created remarkably healthy populations despite the confined living conditions. The integration of medicinal plant cultivation with healthcare delivery provided sustainable medical care that did not depend on external resources. The economic systems of Derinkuyu demonstrate successful alternatives to purely competitive markets. The underground cities operated largely on principles of mutual aid and resource sharing, where individual prosperity was linked to community welfare. The craft specialization and resource management systems created abundance through cooperation while maintaining individual dignity and creative expression. The technological innovations developed in underground cities often anticipated developments that would not be seen elsewhere for centuries. The precision engineering of ventilation systems, the sophisticated water management networks, and the efficient preservation techniques demonstrate technological capabilities that matched or exceeded contemporary surface civilizations. These innovations were driven by necessity, but achieved through ingenuity and persistent refinement. The spiritual traditions that flourished in the underground cities show how religious and philosophical practices can adapt to unusual environments while maintaining their essential character. The underground chapels and meditation spaces created environments for spiritual practice that were arguably superior to many surface religious facilities, demonstrating that sacred space is created by intention and reverence rather than grandeur or ornamentation. The psychological adaptations that allow people to thrive in underground environments reveal remarkable human resilience and adaptability. The communities developed cultural practices, social institutions, and daily routines that maintained mental health and emotional well-being even in conditions that might seem claustrophobic or oppressive to surface dwellers. They created meaningful lives in circumstances that tested the limits of human adaptability. The artistic achievements of underground cities, while necessarily modest in scale, demonstrate that human creativity adapts to available materials and conditions while maintaining its essential character. The carved decorations, craft objects, and cultural expressions created in these depths reveal aesthetic sensibilities that transformed functional spaces into environments of beauty and meaning. The community governance systems that evolved in underground cities provide models for democratic decision-making in small communities facing shared challenges. The necessity of cooperation for survival created social institutions that balanced individual autonomy with collective responsibility, demonstrating that effective governance can emerge from practical necessity rather than imposed authority. The agricultural innovations of underground cities pioneered techniques that are being rediscovered by modern urban agriculture and sustainable farming movements. The intensive growing methods, waste recycling systems, and crop selection strategies developed in these depths demonstrate possibilities for food production in resource-limited environments that remain relevant to contemporary challenges. The communication systems that connected different areas of underground cities and linked them to surface communities demonstrate sophisticated understanding of information management and network design. These systems ensured that knowledge and news could flow efficiently through complex communities while maintaining security and preventing the spread of misinformation. The maintenance traditions that kept underground cities functioning for centuries provide models for sustainable infrastructure management. The emphasis on preventive maintenance, community responsibility for shared systems, and long-term thinking about infrastructure durability created systems that remained functional far longer than comparable surface installations. The trade relationships that connected underground cities to surface economies show how isolated communities can maintain beneficial connections to larger economic systems while preserving their independence and security. The underground cities participated in regional trade networks while maintaining the self-sufficiency that ensured their survival during periods of external disruption. The migration patterns and population management strategies of underground cities demonstrate sustainable approaches to population growth and resource allocation. The communities developed systems for managing population size in relation to available resources while maintaining genetic diversity and cultural continuity across generations. As we prepare to ascend from these remarkable depths, leaving behind the gentle whispers of ancient voices and the profound silence of carved stone, we carry with us the wisdom of peoples who created sustainable, meaningful lives in the most challenging environments. The legacy of Derinkuyu reminds us that human ingenuity, cooperation, and determination can create thriving communities anywhere that people commit to working together toward common goals. The oil lamps that once illuminated these passages have long since been extinguished, but the light of human wisdom that guided their creation continues to shine through the centuries. In the patient craftsmanship of carved chambers, in the ingenious engineering of life support systems, in the careful organization of sustainable communities, we find guidance for creating better ways of living in our own time. The underground cities stand as monuments to the human capacity for adaptation, innovation, and cooperation. They remind us that true security comes not from dominating our environment or our neighbors, but from creating sustainable communities that can thrive through mutual support and careful stewardship of resources. In their stone chambers, we hear echoes of possibilities for more thoughtful, more cooperative, more sustainable ways of organizing human communities. As we emerge from the depths, blinking in the sunlight that the underground dwellers knew only through memory and imagination, we carry with us the peaceful wisdom of peoples who prove that human beings can create meaningful, prosperous lives anywhere that they commit to treating each other with respect and working together toward shared goals. The legacy of the underground cities calls us to build communities worthy of the remarkable human capacity for cooperation, creativity, and care.